Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. I can't hear you. Hello, everyone. It looks as if this stage is too far from the audience, but we'll try as much as possible to make it a warm conversation this morning. I'm joined by no other than Mr. Samson Itodo, someone I've known for many years. When I know him, his beard was not this full or long, and he has not gained this much weight, but I'll not tell you some of the secrets I know about him as we go into this conversation. Before I delve into today's topic, owning the shift, looking at the power of platforms for young people, first I'd like to ask you about what inspired the start of Yaga.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Are we fighting? Good morning, everyone. Yeah, before I came into the hall, I was listening to the music. I was hearing the music from outside. So I thought this place would be on fire. But, well, it's the start of the morning, so let's see if we will, push the energy levels. What inspired Yaga Africa? This was not the question I was prepared for this morning, because I was going to talk about protests this morning, but since Rotimi hit me with this, but before I respond to that, folks, I want you to stand up. Let's give Youth of Africa, a resounding applause for this DARE conference, because this is one event that I love so much. So please, if you will indulge me, please stand. Let's give Youth of Africa a big round of applause. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks for indulging me. You can sit down. The reason I asked us to clap is so we are in a country where young people who have creative ideas don't get the kind of support that they need to bring their ideas to life. We're in a country where you need to know someone, to get any kinds of support to bring your ideas to life. Even though that's changing in today's Nigeria, but one of the things that drove Yaga Africa was the fact that we were very angry about the state of things in Nigeria at that particular point. And that's 18 years ago, because in 2027 will be 20 years at Yaga Africa. And we started this in the university. So I schooled in University of Jos, and those of us who are founding members, are there any great Josites in the room? Great Josites. Thank you very much. So Yaga Africa's story.
How old were you then?
I think, started this journey when I was 19, 20. I think about 19 or 20 years, okay. Thereabout, when this whole journey began. And when you think about Yaga Africa's story, it's really a story of Jos and the environment that we come from. Because we're very angry, and Jos was a very cosmopolitan society that encourages people to speak out. It encourages people to engage. And that's why we did set up Yaga Africa, because we wanted to push back on certain things. The first one was bad leadership. It didn't make sense to us that in the university, students who were elected as student leaders were being penalized for protesting the quality of accommodation in the hostel, as well as hiking school fees. It didn't make any sense to us. And so that's why we started engaging and we started pushing back. The other thing is, why do we work on elections? We work on elections because it's the leadership recruitment process that we have. If you have bad elections, you have bad leaders. There's no guarantee that if you have good elections, you have good leaders, but at least the baseline is, if you've got good elections, the chances that you have transformative leaders is very high. That's why we set up, Yaga Africa 18 years ago, and we're quite humbled by what we have achieved over the last 18 years.
What would you say has been your biggest achievement to date?
The biggest achievements of Yaga Africa is in the young people who I see on a daily basis, who, as a result of engaging with Yaga Africa, they become inspired to take action in their community. And across Africa, we are so humbled when we hear those results. I'm sure some people will think that one of the biggest achievements that we celebrate is the not too young to run or our work on elections. Yes, we do acknowledge that, but really what gives us comfort and happiness is that young person either in a village who didn't know anything about civic participation, but is able to engage, organize their community, and take action. It's about really taking action, because without taking action, and we come from this belief that every human being is privileged to be in a community to transform that community. That's our mentality. And so if you're a young person and you're not doing anything to transform your society, forgive my hard line, you're actually wasting. Because you're in a community because you have something to give back to that community. And that's what we always do through all our engagements. So if you ask me what's our biggest achievement that we celebrate, is in the young people in Nigeria, outside Nigeria, who are leading change as a result of their interface with Yiga Africa.
Thank you very much. In the course of today's conversation, we're going to be taking some polls on the screen. And so I'd ask the technical team to prepare to put our first poll on the screen so that the audience can join in this conversation. But in the light of what you've said, do you think that in today's Nigeria or in today's Africa, do protests still make sense?
Folks, let me ask you, how many of you think protests still make sense? Well, let me rephrase that question, because that's Rotimi's question. Do you think that protests delivers results in Nigeria? How many of you think protests delivers results? Jesus Christ. How many of you think protest does not deliver results in Nigeria? Okay. So the rest of you, where do you stand? Somewhere in the middle. Sometimes it delivers, sometimes it doesn't deliver. Right? And for those who are in between, I am interested in you and those who say no. And to your question, whether protest makes sense. Listen, folks. What is protest in the real sense? I think some of us think protest, which is the perhaps literal experience that you have, is direct action on the streets. It's galvanizing people, to demonstrate in the streets. Yes, that is a form of protest. But protest is beyond that. And why do we have to protest? We have to protest because we have a right to protest. And the right to protest just devolves from the fact that if you are a Nigerian, there's a contract that you have with the Nigerian state. And that the Nigerian state and our leaders owe us certain duties and responsibilities. And when we make demands from them and they don't respond, it is within our right to protest and say, no, we don't like this approach and we want you to solve this particular problem. It's within our right. And some will say, well, sometimes these leaders don't listen to us. And I tell you, take this to the bank. Forget those government-sponsored protesters. Protest does deliver results. The question is, what kind of results does it deliver? And I'll give you 3 results that protests deliver. The first one is, whilst protest may not give you the answer to your question, a classic example is if you're on the streets protesting that which is a common protest that happened recently. Can someone tell me? Anyone? No, let's know. No Embad Governance protest. Which is the most recent? There's a recent protest. NYCN. Did I hear NYCN? And that's a bit political because I have my views about that. So let me not delve into that. But I'll give you a classic example. So for instance, the National Assembly says they're going to pass a compulsory voting bill, which means that if you don't vote, you're going to go to prison. That bill was sponsored, but it was resisted. So say a group of people want the National Assembly, to Some will say they want it passed, some will say they don't want the bill passed. So a classic example, some people say, please kill that bill. So you're protesting to kill that bill. Now, if the National Assembly does not kill that bill and you protested, it doesn't mean that you didn't make an impact. Because in today's Nigeria, galvanizing people to speak out isn't an easy task. Whenever you achieve putting people together to speak out is an achievement. In the field of social movement, we say that a morphic field has been created. What that means is you have gotten people who ordinarily would not speak out to put their resources together to speak with one voice. And that itself solves what we call the collective action problem. And the collective action problem in society is that all of us are angry, but nobody wants to take the first action. Because if one person acts, the opportunity cost on that person is very high. So galvanizing people to take action is one huge success. And you need to acknowledge it as a success. The second one, some of us think that politicians don't listen. Sometimes they come across as tone deaf, but trust me, they do listen. The bill I just referenced, the compulsory voting bill, was actually sponsored by the Speaker of the House of Representatives. It is citizens like yourself that protested against that bill, and the Speaker was forced to withdraw the bill. So it does deliver. And the last, perhaps, success that I'll say it delivers is it sends a strong message to the political class that there is a group of citizens who are not willing to fold their hands and accept everything that the politicians pull down our throat. Because that's what they want you to believe. Keep quiet, just accept, and do not have any opportunity to renegotiate the social contract. So I say, to those of us who think that protest does not deliver, it does deliver some results. Maybe not to the extent that we want, but protest is a continuum. It's not a one-off event. And there are other activities that you can implement to complement protest. Are we together?
Is there protest fatigue in Nigeria, or do you think Nigerians have, in some way, outsourced the protest to a group of people? Say, for instance, my senior brother Showore, who everybody knows will jump on certain issues and protest. Do you think people have outsourced protests to say, Nigeria has too many challenges, we believe that this group of activists should go and protest on our behalf, and maybe perhaps it's also dangerous. We don't want to be arrested by DSS, beaten, possibly shot, but we can be on our phones and tweet about it a few times. Do you think that's the case in Nigeria at the moment?
So let me ask you, how many of you have protested before?
Don't worry, DSS is not in the room. You can raise your hand.
No, and I'm not DSS. Yeah. How many of you have protested before? Okay. How many of you will never protest in your life? NYSC. I can understand. Yeah, because one of you protested a few months ago in Lagos, and we saw what happened. But I really celebrate that young lady. It takes a lot of courage, and that's what we need in Nigeria. You just need to be courageous. You see, I'm not saying you should die, but listen, folks, you have to die for something. No. You have to stand for something. Let me not say die, but listen, you have to stand for something. And we're all young people in this room. And I say that, but I'm not a youth. When I say young, I'm not a youth. I'm above that age. But you have to stand for something. That's what makes you a human being. You've got to stand for something. If you don't stand for something, you would live a life that is worthless. You just go through this life, and you will not be remembered for anything. And I pray that, this DARE conference stirs something in you, because it's really about action. It's you taking action. So when you talk about protest fatigue, yes, a lot of people are tired of protesting. They're tired of protesting for some of the reasons that we've talked about. Either they don't see the results as a result from their action, or because the government has devised a means of countering protest. Today, there are professional protesters, like you mentioned. All you need is to give people 1,000 naira, 5,000 naira, and you can have a bus load of people, from the satellite towns, and you deploy them to the FCT, and the most popular convergence point is Unity Fountain, right? So people are tired of protesting. But that's where government wants you to be. The state wants you to be tired of speaking out so that they can get away with anything that they want to get away with. And we must not allow ourselves to get to that point of despondency where we no longer care about what happens because we feel no one is listening to us. I tell you, if you look around you, there are positive stories of how government has shifted its position because people protested and people spoke. So don't be tired. The second point is, protests may not always be the demonstration you see on the street. It can be complemented with writing petitions and writing letters. It can be complemented with having meetings. It can be complemented with online advocacy. Now, a lot of Gen Zs are criticized for focusing so much on online action. If you're Gen Zs in this place, the first thing I'll say to you, right? Ignore those people. That's the first thing I'll say to you. Ignore those people. The power that you have is the social media and the technology that you have. If they take that from you, you become powerless. So they are attracted to that power and they want to demobilize you by discouraging you from using those tools to engage. So ignore those people. As you're ignoring those people, also know that you need offline action to complement your online advocacy. Because at the end of the day, policy engagement is a combination of offline and online engagement. So please don't end your advocacy with what happens on TikTok, on social media. Please, they are very important, and I'm not going to say that you should stop using those tools, but it has to be complemented with offline action. That you send a tweet online or you made a TikTok video, that's your contribution. But what we are saying at their conference 2025 is you need to take it to the next level. And the next level is post that online engagement, please complement it with physical action. Because part of what the folks that you want to change here is they want to see people who they can engage, because policy engagement requires human beings. It requires people being in the decision-making room. And I often hear this in protest, that protesters should not negotiate. Ha, ha, ha. That's a lie. Protesters should negotiate. Because the whole game of policy making is about sitting in that room. You can have people who are on the street, but please always have a voice in the room, because only then can you get the kind of change that you desire.
A round of applause for Mr. Samson Itodo. What we have seen emerged in the last few years, not only in Nigeria but across the continent, is a rise of leaderless movements, where young people come on social media and say, we're angry about the situation, we want it to change, and we're protesting. But we have no leaders. And nobody should come out and claim that you are the leader of this movement or you are one of the leaders of this movement. And we also don't want to sit on the table and negotiate. This is our list of demands. You either accept it or there's no alternative. Has this made any gains? And what would you say is an alternative pathway?
This is a very controversial subject in the field of politics, in the field of protest and social movements. We lie to ourselves a lot. Listen, there is no such thing as a leaderless movement. If you say there is a leaderless movement, then you don't understand the notion and concept of leadership. When people argue that movements are leaderless, what they simply tell us is that they don't understand the concept of leadership, or they have a limited understanding of leadership. Because leadership in movements, it's not about a person. It's not about a position. It's about shared purpose and shared leadership. That's one. Two, if leadership is about taking decisions, it's about organization. The question is, who makes the decision about the day of the protest, the convergence point, the day that the protesters withdraw, as well as the route for the protest? Who makes that decision? If you find out, it's either a group of people or a person. That is leadership being exercised. So this whole concept of leaderless movement does not exist. Organization is required for protest and movement to be successful, and that's the school of thought that I belong to. The second point, part of the reason why people say they frame movements and protests as leaderless, it's because of the attempt by the state to capture those movements. Because if you capture the individuals, it means you've captured the movements. And I tell folks who were perhaps the adherents of the NSAS protest, and they say NSAS protest was leaderless. But how come the government went after a group of people in the NSAS protest, put them on watch list, froze their accounts? Why did they target those people? They targeted those people because those people exercised some form of leadership in the course of the movement. So this myth that movements are leaderless, I think it's a framing that protesters put as a way of resisting capture by the state. It doesn't mean that those protests don't have leaders. That's the point I want to underscore. And perhaps lastly to say that in our study of movements, we've discovered that movements that have been successful are movements that have centralized structure with a combination of what you call diffuse contention. What that means is you have diffused protest and action in different stages, but there's some level of coordination. When you compare the Reject Finance Bill protest, it's tagged the Gen Z protest, even though there were millennials that played a critical role in that protest. But if you compare the Gen Z protest, that's the Reject Finance Bill protest in Kenya, and the Save Senegal protest in Senegal, you see there is a stark difference in terms of the success that they all achieved. The Kenyan protests, and I've been researching the protests in Kenya, and up until recently, and I spoke with the leaders of the Gen Z protest in Kenya, and all of them told me 6 weeks ago that one of the reasons why they haven't been able to achieve the success of that movement was because it was termed a leaderless movement. But when you compare it to Senegal, the Save Senegal protest, you clearly see that there's a stark difference. And we built a theoretical framework around this, and not to get into the field of social movement scholarship, but to say that every protest to be successful does require leadership, but it's good for the purposes of framing that yes, there isn't any leaders, but please, maybe we should change it to say that we have a concept of shared leadership. And it's not about one person, but a group of people assuming and exercising leadership. Only then can protest or movement say they're successful.
Let's move away from protest and movement. What other alternative exists for young people who want to undershift and use platforms to engage government and to shape decision-making in Nigeria today?
I think there are several layers. And quite frankly, I've been incredibly, proud of more youth organizations that are coming up. I've seen in the last 10 years an exponential growth in the number of youth organizations that are coming up, and they are solving one particular social problem or the other. Because I note that, and when I say youth organization, I mean serious organization. It doesn't mean that there weren't organizations that existed before, but very serious organizations doing high-quality work. And so, if you're a young person here and you're thinking about what other alternatives exist, you need to do three things. The first one is you need to define what particular social problem you want to solve and whether government has a role in solving that problem. There's need for clarity. I know that in the course of this DARE conference, you're going to go through several sessions, so I would not steal the thunder of those who will come after me. but to say that first you need to obtain clarity on what's the problem you want to solve. The second question to ask yourself is, what platform best or puts you in a better position to solve this problem? Often, I hear young people say they want to start an organization because they want to solve a problem. It's not in all cases that setting up an organization helps you solve the problem. Check within you, are there existing organizations, existing projects that can solve that particular problem? And can you work with those organizations to solve the problem? Because folks, to run an organization, it's not easy. In case you don't know, and those who know this very well, including my brother Rotimi, to run an organization is not easy. And let me also break your heart. In case you think that there's a lot of money somewhere that you can access as an organization, in today's world, there's no money. The money has shrunk. Thank God for the Nigerian Youth Futures Fund that is supporting some of these initiatives. But see, there's no money again. And I doubt if in the next 10 years there will be more money to solve some of these problems. It doesn't mean that you can't access some of the resources, but just know that the competition is steeper, is higher, and so it becomes very challenging for small organizations to thrive. So think about the platform that you use. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be through setting up an organization. There are already existing platforms. The third one is about volunteerism. And are you willing, to volunteer your time and resource, to contribute to a particular cause? Just a few days ago, my colleague Cynthia was asking and seeking some level of approval for someone who had the best of education, but was looking for a reference from us and wanted to volunteer for Yaiga Africa for a period of time, because once that is reflected in your resume, it puts you in a better position. And so please, I urge you, volunteer if you have the time and the resource to do that. Because aside helping and boosting your resume, it builds your capacity. And it's your leadership competence, the network opportunities that you have. Those things matter a lot. These are foundational things that you need to deal with. I think the point about engaging government, when you align with an organization that has a structure, some organizations engage directly with government, but government has at different levels. Local government, state and federal government, you have the legislature, you have ministry, departments and parastatals. You need to be very, very clear and understand the anatomy of power in the state and how the state is governed to see how best can you engage. Often we don't spend time to do our research and understand the issues better. And so when we confront state officials, we come from a very ignorant point of view. And if you want to keep the doors open for you, if you're engaging with the state, you need to come from an informed point of view. Make the policymakers see the reason why you are their best ally, their best partner to continue to engage with you. And that can only come if you build your knowledge base. So it's important to do that.
All right. I'll ask one more question to Mr. Samson Itodo before I open up the floor and see if there are opportunities for questions from the audience. The percentage of those who go out to vote in Nigerian elections keep reducing by the day. Is this a verdict on the electoral process? And what do you think can be done for young people to have faith in the electoral process?
So before I respond to that question, this session is a session on protest. So I want to register a protest. It says it's tea conversation. And before I came here, I asked them for the tea. But they've not provided my tea. I hope the tea comes before I leave.
It's virtual tea, virtual.
You see, he's moving the goalpost. But that's a joke. How many of you will vote in 2027? How many of you will vote in 2027? No, let me ask this in the negative. How many of you will not vote in 2027? For want of time, and it's just that the distance, I would have loved to actually hear from you. So maybe during the questions, if the mic comes to you, and you are amongst one of those persons who raise their hands why you're not going to vote in 2027, please feel free to share. But let me speak to those of you who will not vote in 2027, that you are actually the problem of Nigeria's democracy. You are the problem. And I say that with a huge sense of responsibility. Because I know some of you are not voting because you feel that your vote will not count. Some of you may choose not to vote because the political parties don't present competent candidates, so the options on the ballot don't inspire any confidence. Some of you may be as a result of you're scared that there might be violence in the next elections. There could be several reasons. But Rotimi, to your question, is it a verdict? I think the fact that we have low turnout of young people, of citizens broadly, in our electoral process, it's not just an indictment on the electoral process, it's an indictment on our governance process. Because for the most part, people are not coming out to vote because they don't see the meaning in their lives. Because how do you explain people who went out to vote and then within months they are out of jobs? The inflation rate is high, even though we are told it's come down to 18%. Access to economic opportunities are very limited. And then you tell them to go and vote. People, it doesn't make sense to a lot of people. So it's really an indictment that people feel that government is not performing, and so why should they go out and vote again? But yes, people don't have trust in the electoral process. That's not far-fetched. Yesterday, the new INEC chairman was confirmed, and even the lawmakers, some of them who rig elections, they're the same people asking the INEC chairman if he will declare results, the actual results, you know, that the actual winner in an election. And we know that some of our politicians are the ones who put INEC under pressure. So there's a lack of trust, no doubt. But the point I'd like to make, colleagues, is if you don't vote in the next elections, you are contributing to the problem. Because if young people don't make their numbers count, this whole thing about we are the leaders of today and tomorrow will make no sense. So my call on you is make your numbers count by showing up to cast your vote at the next elections for a candidate of your choice. Nigeria has the lowest voter turnout in Africa. Our sister Ghana recorded about 70% turnout in their last election. How come that we are not showing up? So please don't stay away, because when you stay away, you allow bad leaders emerge from our electoral process.
Thank you very much. At this point, I'd like to open up the floor to take the first round of 5 questions. Let me see with an indication of your hand if you have any question for this session. And can I also get one of the volunteers to help me with a roving mic? Can I get a roving mic to please move around? And so I would take, the light here is so bright, but I can see some hand. I see one person wearing black, vigorously waving. That's the first person. And please keep your question brief, but let me identify the first 5 people before you speak. There's someone behind you, that's number 2. There's a hand behind you, that's number 2. On this side of the auditorium, I see one gentleman behind, that's 3. Are there any other hands that I'm not seeing? I see the lady wearing white and black, that's 4. And then I see the gentleman on the far end here, that's 5. So please tell us your name, and you have 1 minute. Thank you.
Okay, hello, good morning. My name is Joyce Samuel, and I'm also an alumni of UniJOS. So my question is, we have a right to protest, but it's no secret how unsafe protesting is in Nigeria, which also discourages the masses from being involved, from injuries to incarceration and loss of life, e.g. what happened during EndSARS. What is the plan on making protest and speaking out safer for the youth, and how do we help those who have been injured and incarcerated unjustly? Thank you.
Yes, let's go to question number 2.
Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Gabriel Evergreen. from Speak Out Africa Initiative. In relation to what you say about voting or not voting in election, there is this general belief that whether we vote or we do not vote, who will become the leader eventually is being done either one way or the other. So to me, I think I need more clarity about what you said, because I feel whether I vote or I do not vote, eventually whoever will become, for example, the president will be. As we have already known now, a lot of people are saying that we already know who is going to be the president coming 2027. So, and if my vote is not going to count, and I know that the person I'm going to vote for is supposed to be the winner, and eventually it doesn't happen, so I don't really see the need for going to the poll. So I want you to throw more light on that, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gabriel. There was a hand on the other side of the room. On the other side of the room.
Okay. Are you referring to me, sir?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Lawale and Mr. Itodo. My name is Oluwamoyo Olufemi Ajaja, representing the NYFF. I'm one of the grantees. So my question, first and foremost, I want to appreciate your professionalism and technical skills over the years. And my question is just straight to the point. During the primaries of these, our politicians or the political parties, we understand that all these, the big men in the field, they will always mobilize their candidate and vote buyings, even at the primary stage. They are not even dollars. So if these our politicians can contribute to that, they are paying their constituency member dollars. And how do we now want to convince even the voters that they should not be attracted? They should not be attracted by these people that are selling their votes. I think you can understand what I'm trying to say, sir.
Yes, that's
so.
Right.
If at the primary level, it has gone that bad. So how do we now want to convince the voters now that they should not be attracted with that money? That is one. Now the second thing I want to understand is that, most of all these political leaders, every one of them will give their manifestos. But we now see that their manifestos is still recycling. It's the same manifesto they have been using over the years. So it will even be hard for us to even know those ones that they have the heart of the people at heart. So do you think, sir, because as for me, do you think, sir, that we can just, because as for me now, most of them, they are just recyclers. They are just the same. So I'm not convinced, because one thing is that they will say one thing, but they will not deliver. So how do we want to be convinced that these people, they will be held accountable, even when they are voted for and voted in, sir?
Thank you very much. And I know there's one hand here, the lady in white and black. Can we please pass the mic to the lady in white and black? Please tell us your name and go straight to the point.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everybody. My name is Victoria Wan, founder of the Stutter Awareness Foundation. So my question is, based on what you said about when you want to start a foundation to address a social issue, the steps that you take. You spoke about define your problem, then ask yourself if the government has a role to play in helping you solve this social problem, and also look out for existing organizations to volunteer with. Now, my question to this is, I started a foundation that has, with a defined problem to address stigma around stuttering. And there is no existing organization in Nigeria doing something specific to this. And I desperately want to address the government because the government has 80% role to play in addressing this problem. So without such existing organization that I can go to, volunteer with, or do anything with, how else do I, as a young person in Nigeria, get to address the government for this social problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then the last question is the gentleman on my far right. Please tell us your name and straight to the point.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Enoch Dauda, a representative of the African Youth Health Summit Group. Most of the issues we do protest are national issues, but what we usually used to discover is there is a divide, usually, where only one part of the country is engaging in the protest or one group is engaging, and then there is no national unity. So is it possible to achieve a united front during protests so that it will be more result successful? And then one of the reasons why I've never participated in a protest is basically security. How do we ensure security? Because I don't want to go out to protest and then come back injured or harmed, or worst case scenario, dead. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Here we have the 5 questions. I'll try to do like a short recap. The first question is around saying that a protest is dangerous, especially during end SARS. How do we make protests safer? And I think it aligns also with what the last gentleman was saying around unity first, and also the security around people going out to protest. I know Gabriel also mentioned something around voting or not. The leaders are already selected. He feels his vote would not count. So why should he then go out to vote? Oluwamuyiwa talked about mobilization during primaries, how he feels that the elections are already bought, the use of the dollarization of the primary process and all of that. And Victoria spoke about the foundation she started to address stuttering and not knowing any other organization that does similar work in Nigeria, and how she can address that in that aspect. And I think that's all the questions. The last question also was focused on safety during the during the protest processes.
Thank you very much for those questions. So, you see, their conference is about inspiring young people to act. And because this is about inspiring you to act, I'm going to tell you some stories in response to some of your questions. And I don't mean that those stories will become your stories, but I just want to tell you that in case you're thinking about these questions, just know that it is the lived experiences of other people. And I'm going to tie the 2 questions about protests together. To begin with, how we make protests safer. For protests, those who are organizing protests, there's always a security kit and briefing that protesters have. And every, structured protest that is driven by altruistic objectives, that is devoid of partisanship and not sponsored by the state, would always have safety tips. For instance, in the colors that people wear to protest, I think I should double down on that, because some of the things that I would say, I don't know how it's going to be misinterpreted. I might be disclosing certain tools, certain secrets that often the state might use when they want to clamp down on protesters. But just know that if you're planning a protest, you do need some level of security briefing, and you need a security kit. And it's first about who and how do you conduct yourselves. You need to ensure that you've got first aid in place. You also need to notify the security agencies, because the law is very clear that you inform them. You don't need the approval. And this is a matter that has been decided by the courts repeatedly. But often you hear the police say you need an approval. You don't need an approval of the police. Often for protests that I've been part of, we write to the police to inform them that this protest is going to happen and we want them to come protect the protesters. So that's one strategy, because if you seek approval, know that you will not, in most cases, you're not going to get the approval, especially if that protest is against some of the actions of government or against a particular institution. The one thing that we've seen also over time is this counter-protest. And sometimes these counter-protests are meant to demobilize. the genuine protesters, but to also attack the genuine protesters so that they instill fear. You see, fear is the greatest weapon that the opposition does have. And in this case, opposition can be the state, and it could be any other actor. They instill fear in you so you don't show up. Because when you show up on the streets, the media takes it. The international community is watching. It casts a blight on the social capital that political officers actually have. So please note that protest is a strong tool for social control, and you have a right to doing so. But there are ways you can protect protesters. And I've said this over time. And for my brother who is scared about protest, you will die for something. The question is, what are you dying or what's killing you at the end of the day? And let me use this story. In your free time, Google Shakira from Kenya. Shakira was one of the leading protesters in the Kenyan protest. There's a popular video of Shakira when she was confronting the police officers who detained some of the protesters in Kenya. And she was screaming at them, and they threatened they were going to shoot her. And she did say, "Shoot me." She was confronting them, and she was quite bold and courageous. Now, I'm not saying everyone will be that courageous, but you know, sometimes you need a certain level of madness to push back on some of the terrible things that the state puts before us. But you know what is interesting? They didn't shoot her, right? But we were having lunch in Nairobi on one occasion 6 weeks ago. And we were in that restaurant, and the restaurant attendants and the manager of the restaurant, when you're in a restaurant and there's so much attention on that table, there was a lot of attention on the table because I was having a research interview with them. But because I've done this over time, I knew that these people had become very popular, that so many people saw them as icons. You know what? At the end of the day, the restaurant manager, she's Muslim, so she doesn't drink alcohol. Doesn't mean that there are no Christians who don't drink alcohol, but I'm just saying that she in particular wasn't drinking alcohol. But they gave us freebies in that restaurant because Shakira was on that table. And the manager said it was because of Shakira. And I asked them, have you gotten a return on your investment? They said, no, they've not gotten return on the investment, but the social capital that they've built. And I'm not saying social capital should be the driving philosophy of protest. But the point I am making is, if you're part of a particular cause and you are speaking for people, there are certain things, secondary gains that you will actually achieve. And people will rise to speak for you when you're part of those protests, because that's what solidarity is about. And so I encourage you, and one way to push back is really about standing, for solidarity. The other question about, that the winner of elections have been decided. And this is a problem, right? We always think elections are about about the president. We're not thinking about our local government chairman. We're not thinking about our legislator. I hope you know that as a Nigerian, you are represented by not more than 7 people. In the state, everyone here comes from a ward. All of us who are Nigerians, we come from a ward. In that ward, there is a councillor that is elected to represent you. So that's your first representative. We all come from local governments. There's a local government chairman. That local government chairman represents you. We come from local governments, and so we have members of our state houses of assembly. Everybody here is represented by someone in your state house of assembly. In the National Assembly, you have 2 people representing you. One in the House of Reps and one in the Senate. At the executive, you have the governor that represents the entire state. And at the national level, the president. Why are we so focused on the president? Why are we not focused on what happens in our local community? Because when you think that the winner has been decided for the presidential, does that mean that the winner has been decided at your local level? The point here is you can also influence those changes. And sometimes it's also part of political propaganda that the winner has been decided, so there is no need for you to show up. Even if you are the one on the ballot, part of your tactics will be to let your opponents think that you've already won the elections before the elections. That way they feel threatened. Who says that you cannot upturn it? And the best way to do that is for people to show up in their large numbers. The more we stay out of not voting, the more that bad leaders will emerge from our electoral process. And someone said they are not convinced. If outcomes of manifestos are not implemented, the question is, what are you doing about it? Do we know the manifestos very well? Do we know the state and the status of implementation? Can we monitor them and then engage them that they've not fulfilled some of those promises? And I'm very impressed with some of the campaigns and projects I see about tracking promises that candidates or politicians have made and ensuring that we follow up on them. To my sister who runs an organization, the big question is stuttering a health problem? If it's a health problem, there's a health ministry that has responsibility for that. It could also be a social problem. And so you have whether it's a combination of the Ministry of Health or the Ministry of Social Development, at whatever level, those could be your partners. But an organization may not necessarily work on stuttering, but it could work on social issues and public health. They could be your partners. So you need to identify them and see how you build very structured partnerships with them. I hope this responds, to your question, right? Because for someone who has founded an organization, you do need all the kinds of support, because we've seen ideas die because they do not have the support. And often support doesn't have to be funding. It could be an advice. It could be a network. So don't always think that the support that you need is about money, 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 money. Like I mentioned, the money, bakudi, anymore in this field. So think about other ways of generating support to advance your work.
A round of applause for Mr. Samson Itodo. We're gradually moving to the end of today's conversation. Let me also just say that one of the things that we're doing differently at DARE Conference 2025 is that for this year, we open up an opportunity for young people to say they want to speak on the DARE Conference stage, right? And for this conference, I think we selected at least 4 or 5 of those who filled the form and said, we want to speak on your stage. And they proposed their own topic. They told us what they want to speak about, and we selected them. Guess what? We're not looking for people who have spoken at many international conferences or have spoken in many places. No, that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for young people with bright ideas of something that is innovative that they're willing to speak about. And if you have written to us and you say you want to speak about stuttering, perhaps we will have given you the platform to speak about that. And so don't look at partnership to say, oh, I can't partner because I don't find other organizations doing the things that I'm doing. Look at other people who have platform and say, how can I bring what I am doing that is innovative onto their platform? And that way you can collaborate. There are a lot of organizations who have, for instance, clubs in public schools all over Nigeria, including in the FCT. And they're always building curriculum every time. What can we teach these students? So you can lean on those organizations, for instance, and say, give me one class. Let me come and teach these public school students about stuttering, about not stigmatizing their colleagues who are stuttering, for instance. That's an opportunity. I have opportunity for 2 final questions before we close. Are there any more questions in the room? 2 final questions. Anyone? Do I see any hands in any corner? The lights are in my face, so I can't see. Okay, I see one gentleman. That's one. Any second person? Any second person? Going. I see the gentleman here as well. I want to take a lady. Any other lady? Any other lady? No ladies. Okay, let's focus on the gentleman. Please, your name and your question. Can we get him the mic? All right, let's start with you since you have the mic. Please, your name and straight to your question.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Idu Ochoche Calvin, representing Tranquil Youth Organization of Nigeria. My question is this: based on what I've met on the ground so far, I want to ask, and I want to know, the power of incumbency in this country. You know, once somebody has been elected to a particular position, it seems that the person is going to continue for maybe for the period of, for the duration, maybe like 2 terms. So I don't know, as a youth, what can we do to reduce the power of incumbency in this country? Because once somebody assumes that office, it seems that it's going to be the alpha and omega. Yes, so that's my question, sir.
Thank you very much. Do you know any instances where somebody has used the power of incumbency and they have lost in the Nigerian election?
Yes. Good luck. It's a practical example.
All right, thank you very much. So good luck did not have any luck at that election. All right. Mr. Samson will answer your question. I'm just throwing it back to you to see if you know anyone. Yes, to your question, sir.
My name is Malomo Toluwalashe, and I work with Peace Shapers Africa Initiative, as well as being into youth advocacy. So I would like to ask, how do we ensure the security of voters or people that intend to vote at the polling booths? Because one reason why I don't want to vote as a young person is because I know that violence can result in the polling station, and I might end up not getting back to my house that particular day. So as one being into youth advocacy, one thing I want to do is to look at some of these issues and know how to provide solutions so I can gather young people like me to vote as well. So how do we ensure that we go to such places and we come back as we went? Thank you.
Over to you, Samson.
Okay. You know, I'm going to be very brutally honest with you guys. If you like me after now. If you like, hate me. But I want to go back to my house tonight, proud that I had the opportunity to say the truth, and I said the truth. And what I'm about to say you may not like, but I have to just say it anyways. To my brother who talks about safety, when I was talking to the protesters in Kenya a few weeks ago, Shakira that I just mentioned, I asked her, what if they had shot you? You know what she told me? She said, because what's the essence of living when in actual fact the entire governance system has collapsed? What's the point? That they've lost hope and faith. So what's the point actually living? For me, that point was very instructive. Because young Nigerians, see, we need to be ready to pay certain prices if we want things to change in this country. What I'm telling you is, if you think that things are going to change from a comfort zone, it's not going to happen. I'm not saying you should go and put yourselves and expose yourselves, to harm. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, don't allow people who tell you that elections are violent and that's why you shouldn't show up to vote. Don't allow them win, because it's not every election that is violent. There are very few of those. And when you show up and you see there is an imminent danger, remove yourself from the place. And don't expose yourself, because when you stay away, you lose the opportunity. So I plead with us, don't allow, there are places that we know are very, very tensed. But it's not across the entire country. But when you have the opportunity, please show up in your large numbers. I beg you, right? And when you show up and there's an imminent threat, please just leave the space so you have the opportunity to vote at the next elections. My brother, about the point about incumbency. And let's not look presidential. Let's look at the state. The power of incumbency is being exploited by those who are in power. They are exploiting it because we don't have institutions that hold people to account. In the Anambra elections, this Anambra in 22 days' time, if you go to Anambra today, the state government has written to all the hotels and have taken over all the rooms in the hotels. They have imposed fines as high as 50 million to put billboards. We've seen where political parties are prevented from using state apparatus, state institutions or assets for campaigns because politics is a do or die. That's why people use the power of incumbency. And you say, what can we do as young people? I think this is actually beyond young people. It's really about citizens. What can we do about citizens? One, use your voice. Rise in condemnation of every attempt by incumbents to oppress people. Two, use the courts to go and enforce your rights. Some of us may not believe in the courts, but the fact that we don't believe does not mean we should not test the courts. So please keep using and testing the courts and putting, demands on the state. And lastly is to really organize. We've seen incumbents lose elections. There's nothing saying that incumbents cannot lose election. It depends on how we are organizing. But to do that, you need a cohesive opposition. What we currently see across the country does not show that these opposition actors are serious. And so you cannot contest for power if you don't have a cohesive opposition. But again, one of the things that the incumbents also do is to cause confusion in the opposition. I know Rinsola is here, she's looking at me, but yes, we know, yes, notwithstanding, but we still have to say the truth. I know she'll come and counter, but let me say it ahead of time, that we know some of the shenanigans. But really, one of the people in public office that we celebrate so much is Rinsola. And if there's one thing, if you're here and you're part of a political party, to learn from Rinsola is the whole, the whole culture and practice of patience. Because where she is today is where she would have been 10 years ago. But after all the sacrifices she made for her party, it's just now that she was appointed DG, when I expect that now she should be a minister of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. But she's waited and stayed loyal, to the party, even though you did tactical maneuver at some point. But it's good that you're here so you can share that experience about leadership. And I think that's something that we can learn from her. Whether you like the APC or you don't, but there are transformative leaders in the party that I think have some lessons that we as young people can learn, because this is our generation, and we must learn from those who are excelling within this generation. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Before we close this panel, this conversation with Mr. Samson Itodo this morning, I'd just like to add that for those of us who have participated in protest does not automatically turn from being peaceful to very violent. There are stages it graduates. And if you know how to read the room, you know when it's becoming dangerous, and you don't have to stay. If you think that you don't have the spine and your ancestors are not with you, you can leave and go home. So there are many tactics. I'm sure if you speak to Mr. Itodo before he leaves, there are many tactics on how to understand the protest. Like he has also said, you negotiate with the security officers. You tell them that you're here for a peaceful protest. You're not going to be violent. There are times when other people will mix with you to cause violence. They want to disrupt the flow of traffic. They want to break people's windscreen. You identify those people, you hand them over to the police. These ones are not part of us, because the police are looking for every opportunity to pounce down on your protest. And like he has also said on election day too, most elections, almost 90% of elections in Nigerians are not violent. on the election itself. You vote, people come there, they play, they gist. Sometimes people are rowdy, but that's the most that you can get. Most elections in itself are not violent. So you can go out to vote, and when you see that your polling unit is becoming very rowdy and very violent, you can also leave. Most times they are targeting actually the ballot boxes. They're not actually targeting you, or they are targeting known opposition figures that they are targeting. They're not targeting everyday Joes who go out to vote. On this note, I'd like to close today's conversation with Mr. Samson Itodo, someone that I've known for very many years, and we're happy that Yaga has done 18 years. We look forward to the 20th year anniversary, and I'll be here to eat the anniversary cake with them.
Just one of the things Rotimi didn't mention, some of the things I know I actually learned from Rotimi, because Rotimi started this journey before some of us. So please give it up for Rotimi.
Thank you very much.